Well, welcome to the roundtable. With me, as always, Mark Dame Flatired and Jeff Franklin. How are we doing, guys?
Doing great.
Doing well. How's
All right.
Robert?
So today's topic is going to be Pearl Harbor. We talked about it on Monday, but I thought that we needed to go a little bit more in depth and pay it a little bit more respect than what we were able to do on Monday because of my own technicalities. So I thought a more deep dive would be more pertinent. So we called in Mark and said, "Okay, we're talking about Pearl." So first of all,
He keeps
I'm
us
the
on the
Canadian
straight
in the
and
group.
narrow.
Yeah, I'm the Canadian in the group. So, what does Pearl mean to each one of you? Start with Jeff.
Well, it's the start of World War II to me. We got attacked by the Japanese. It was one of the first times that America ever got attacked in a major way. It was the 9/11 of that era. And it mobilized the American public into getting into this war, being behind the war. So it was a very important time, and it changed the course of America in that we became the world's police after this World War concluded. So things changed big time with this war.
Mark?
Jeff was correct on that. And to add to that, Japan woke up a sleeper. I mean, like Jeff said, America had not been directly attacked to this, or you said, I apologize, Robert. America had not been attacked to this point, and that opened up an effort that had never been seen before at this point in time. Even at the industrial age, nothing had been. The war effort that America put forth was one of the greatest things that ever happened. As far, well, not for what happened afterwards, but the effort that it put into getting defending itself and defending its allies.
Yeah, it sure helped the Depression.
We won't get into the economics.
Yeah. So Pearl Harbor, in case you've been under a rock, is when the Japanese attacked the Pacific Fleet. And lucky for the United States, the carriers were not in harbor at the time. So the Pacific Fleet gets caught flat-footed. And what was it? 75% of the Navy fleet is toast, damaged or otherwise. Now, some of those ships would rise to fight again, much to the chagrin of the Japanese when it comes to the later on in the war. But for now, the Pacific Fleet has been almost neutralized. The United States' military power, as far as Navy is concerned, after Pearl, is significantly less than what it would have been. Now, at the end of this conversation, we'll get to was it worth it or not. But first off, I want to get into a couple of things. And I mentioned this on Monday, and a couple of people in the chat were shocked when I asked the question, who shot first? Because if you read your traditional history books, the answer to that question is the Japanese. However, if you want to get technical and really, really, really nitpick, the answer to that question is the United States. Because they sunk a submarine about an hour and a half before the actual Pearl Harbor attack. Now, that doesn't mean that the United States started the war. Let's not go that far. The submarine was entrenched in American territory, and it was where it had no business being, and it should have been sunk. Let's make that clear. Let's not try to say we're passing the buck here. But it is a little trivia question that a lot of people don't know. Who shot first? And a lot of people will answer the Japanese.
To be honest, until you brought it up today, I did not know that.
And they would be wrong. It was the United States. And actually, that commander, and I wish I had pulled his name up, but went down like for the longest time. He was made fun of, ostracized. Oh yeah, you sunk a submarine. Yeah, okay, sure you did. And it was because at the time the Navy had no faith in the ability to sink a submarine by depth charge, and they should have. It worked in World War One, but it was like, yeah, okay, cowboy, you sunk a submarine. Sure, you did. Right, we'll get right on that. Whereas if they had kept, there were a couple of points, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. The couple of points where arrogance set up for the failure. And one of the arrogance was submarine? Ah, you're talking bullshit. There's no way there was a submarine. Now, if that had been taken serious and Pearl had been put on full alert, submarine was sunk, everyone to battle stations, possible attack inbound, the United States would have been prepared. The Navy units would have been prepared. Secondly, another mistake that was made was the radar detection. So the radar pick up the planes coming in. They're mistakenly identified as friendly. And therefore the alarms aren't set because they were expecting a flight group to arrive at about that same time. And so they were marked as friendly. They were Japanese fighters coming in. So if that alarm had been tripped, again, they would have had not as much notice, but they would have had more notice. Men would have been arming the machine guns. They would have been trailing the guns. They would have been getting ready. But again, that was fluffed off as, oh, that's just friendly planes coming in. So there's 2 points right there where the alarm should have went off, and they didn't. Anybody else have any points of reference to where maybe the ball was dropped? Jeff?
I really don't have any.
Okay. Mark?
I'm the same way. I think you hit it square on the head with that.
You know, I want to be completely clear here. We are armchair quarterback. We are, Monday night football. Monday morning football right now, because we have hindsight. They didn't have hindsight. But
Absolutely.
the one that's the overglaring mistake was the submarine. To me, that is the biggest mistake of Pearl. Was you don't have enough faith in your commanders that if they tell you they sunk a submarine, they sunk a submarine. And what really would have been the negative if they would have went to full alert? Yeah, it would have ruined a couple of people's days if it was false. But it really doesn't ruin any, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't. But they didn't have enough. What does that say? They didn't have enough faith in their commanders to, you attacked a submarine? Yeah. You believe you sunk it? Yeah. Okay, put the base on alert. Instead, they ridiculed the commander and said, no, you didn't. There's no way a submarine got this close. Not going to happen. When in hindsight, 5 did. They all were sunk, but that's besides the point. Or ran aground. So Pearl Harbor is... Now, the other thing that I find interesting is the reason for the aircraft being the way they were when the planes came in. And that was they were scared of sabotage. So to protect against sabotage, all the planes, instead of being in their hangars or, hidden away, were out on the fields, wing to wing, being watched to make sure nobody could sabotage them. Well, they also just set up a shooting gallery for the Japanese planes.
Well, not to mention, the runways would have probably the runways and tarmacs would have probably been graded up no matter what, whether the airplanes had been outside or not.
No,
So
but they
you're-
would have probably lost less aircraft.
Yeah, but you would have still
Yeah,
had
probably
aircraft stuck
so.
on the ground for
Yeah.
weeks
Yeah.
before you could get them off the ground. That was the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, they still would have been stuck on the ground, but you would have lost less.
Yeah.
And for the second wave, you might have been able to get more up
True.
for the second wave. The other thing too that the United States got lucky in the sense that, and I take nothing away from the life lost at Pearl. It was a tragedy, and the men and women
Horrible.
who died at Pearl should always get a moment of silence, and we should remember that yes, there were mistakes made, but it cost men and women lives, and you don't get those back. You can repair a battleship, you can fix a destroyer, but the
Build
hell
more
that
planes.
those men and women went through that day, the poor men trapped in the ship as it capsized, and they're banging on the hull, and nobody can get to them. And they're just banging on the hull, and then eventually the bangs get quieter and less. It was to the point where they got a cutting torch and they were cutting holes in the ship to get to people, and they didn't get to everybody. Moments like that, no matter how much you can sit back and armchair quarterback, you have to keep that in mind, that the hell that those men and women went through that day, whether it could have been prevented or not is kind of irrelevant at that point. It's a sombering thought, and it is a thought that I think we need to really stop and remember that yes, it was a day that the United States was attacked, but it was also a day that American soldiers lost their lives, and they didn't even know they were in a war. They knew one was coming, but they didn't know they were in it till they were in it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Very true.
So I'm going to go around the table here, so to speak, and kind of get, I guess, your top three thoughts on the battle itself, what you thought and then also just a caveat, hindsight being 2020, what would, if you could go back and give a warning, what would it be? What would you suggest? What would you, you need to have blah blah. So we'll start with Jeff.
Well, first off, I want to say that I looked up the information on the destroyer that sunk the sub. It was the USS Ward.
Yes.
And it was in command by Lieutenant Commander William Outerbridge.
Yeah.
Was his name. And here's an interesting fact about that destroyer. It was actually sunk on December the 7th, 1944 by a kamikaze attack.
Yeah.
3 years later. So
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. It was on the same day of the year.
Yep.
So I guess I'll just summarize that, it was just a horrible day. Like you said, these men and women, they lost their lives in a war that really hadn't been declared yet by the United States. Japan obviously had. And
Actually, slight correction. Japan hadn't declared war.
okay, well,
They didn't.
in a way
declare
they
war.
did, but with the
Yeah,
attack they did.
They declared war with a bomb. Carry on.
Exactly. And it mobilized the country. I don't know how many people knew that this war was coming as far as the American populace, but it got the American populace behind the war effort. And I don't think we could have won the war if we didn't have that. So I think it was a mistake that the Japanese actually attacked. If I could have gone back, there's a movie about that very topic of going back in time and warning the Americans that this was coming, and actually maybe even stopping. It was called The Final Countdown. I don't know if you've seen the movie.
Maybe, but I not off the top of my head.
It was about a U.S. Aircraft carrier that got sent back in time right before Pearl Harbor, and they were in the Pacific, and they had to make a decision. Do we stop the Japanese? Do we warn the Americans that the Japanese are coming? What do we do? It was an interesting movie. It was produced, I think, in 1981.
Okay.
So if you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. It has some interesting footage of a real aircraft carrier. But what would I say? I don't know. I don't know if they would believe me.
Yeah.
If I went back in time, and I tried to explain what was going on, would they actually believe me? And one of the characters in this movie actually tried to do that, and basically was just laughed at.
Yeah.
You're who? You're saying what? And they didn't believe him at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it would be a good idea to do that, and it would change history.
It would.
And I don't know if that's a good thing.
No,
because
usually
you
isn't.
don't know the consequences of what will happen if you change history. So I don't think I would even try.
Yeah. And Mark?
First off, well, going back to what Jeff said, the Nimitz was the aircraft carrier that went through on that in that movie. But a heightened sense of alert. I mean, we're still in a war situation with the the European theater. We know that Europe is not going to make it across into the Pacific, but you also, like you said, you have to watch the Japanese. The Japanese were part of the Axis. You know they could strike at any given moment. A heightened sense of alertness on the American side probably would have been, definitely would have been better, because the loss of life and the loss of ships and aircraft would have been nullified or less than what we got. I'm just doing a quick read, and with the ships taken out and the aircraft taken out, nothing was as far as the power station, dry dock, shipyard maintenance, fuel and torpedo storage facilities. None of that was hit.
Yeah,
it was only
neither was the oil reserve.
It was only taking the American fighting aspect out of it.
Yeah,
which was a critical mistake on Japan's part, because, like I said at the beginning of the show, they awoke the sleeper.
Yeah,
and that even though it took fighting island to island across the Pacific to get to dropping the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was still a long effort. It probably lasted longer than it should have, especially with Japan being by itself.
Yeah.
So, and as far as the Japanese aspect from it, viewing it tactically, attacking Hawaii was a bad decision. I think didn't somebody, was it you or Robert, that when y'all were talking on the show Monday brought up Midway would have been a better target than Hawaii?
Robert.
Well, it was a softer target. Yeah.
That would have been probably the more likable target to go after than Hawaii. You're making a swords thrust into America's naval facilities, and I mean, you don't take out the ships, you don't take out the airplanes, but you don't have to go as far. You don't have to burn up your reserves and use every bit of all the weapons you have and all the resources you have, just to do that when the Americans basically came back from it and brought the effort directly to you.
Yeah. See, and I'll touch on that, because for me, I've always believed, and I could be wrong, I mean, this is hypothetical, so bear with me. I've always believed that if the Japanese had not attacked Pearl, Everything else historically happens except Pearl. That the American support to go to war wouldn't have been as much. Because you got to remember, building up to World War II, the American populace is isolationist of thought.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't attack the mainland, if you don't attack Pearl, but you attack the Philippines, you attack the faraway bases in the east, the rhetoric could have been spun. We told you this was a bad idea. We have to stop being the British and we have to be us. What are we trying to have all these colonies over here where they can be attacked? Get our boys home.
Can I add to that?
Yes, absolutely.
More than likely, if it had gone that route, the nuclear weapons, we wouldn't have had use of nuclear weapons. I don't think it may have even pushed that off as far as into the Korean War.
Yeah, possible.
And who's to say what would have happened at that point? Because at that point, the Russians weren't our allies. Not that they really were in World War II, but they would have been. They would have been armed as well. And who's to say we would be? I mean, that's another subject for another day.
Yeah,
what if story.
But
I think the use of the atomic bomb would not have played a factor in Japan's
I don't think
surrender.
so either.
I think it would have been a conventional war at that point, and it would have ended that
way. So I'm gonna get final thoughts because I know Mark's time is short. So I'm gonna get final thoughts here, and then I'm gonna give my final, and then we'll wrap this up. So Jeff, start with you.
Well, final thought is that this was just a horrible day for the United States. We lost a lot of good people that day in this sneak attack, this surprise attack. We made mistakes. I think the Japanese made mistakes. It often happens in war, you have mistakes on both sides, but it mobilized us. It changed the course of our future history, if you will, at that point. And it changed the world in doing that. So in one regard, I don't know if the United States being the world's police is a good thing or not. In some ways it was, in some ways it wasn't, but it changed how the world worked at that point. So it's a major point in the history of the world.
Yes. And Mark?
It's a moment in time that should never be forgotten. This is a point where you have to remember what was done, no matter when it happened. We're getting closer and closer to it being a century ago, and it still rings true, like you just said, Jeff. I mean, America at that point, at the end of the war, had become the world's police. Had it not gotten to that point, we would still be isolationists. So, I mean, it's, you could look at all the what ifs, all the what ifs. I mean, it still happened. And it's a point that should always be honored in American history, definitely, and world history, because it's the simple fact that America grew up that day.
Yes. I'll put it another way, so I'm not just regurgitating. December 7th is not just a day that will live in infamy. It is the day that Churchill got his way. Mm-hmm. And for those who know, December 7th will go down in infamy. It is also the day that Churchill got his way. And, again, I want to stress, because it's important to me that we remember the men and the women who died on that day. And we live our lives to this day to honor that sacrifice. We make sure that what we do today honors that sacrifice. And we don't think that debt has been paid, because that debt will never be paid. That is a debt that never gets taken off the register. Those men and women's debt, the debt we owe those men and women, will never be cleared. And the best we can do is each day try to live our lives to honor that sacrifice. And just a quick little side notes. Next Friday, I hope you all will join us as Mr. CCTV joins us for part 4 of telling his story. It is very important to me that we get that done. And I thank you for all the support in that. Then we will be reconvening the roundtable the Friday after for the Christmas where the guns fell silent. It'll be a very interesting conversation. I hope you all will be able to tune in. And as always, as Richard would say, thank you and good night.